Good afternoon, everybody. Earlier today, I was briefed by my Homeland Security team on the events in Boston. We're continuing to monitor and respond to the situation as it unfolds. And I've directed the full resources of the federal government to help state and local authorities protect our people, increase security around the United States as necessary, and investigate what happened.
And we've just gotten word of not one but two explosions near the finish line of the Boston Marathon. These are live pictures coming into us now, I assume from Fox News Boston and Fox 26 up there, but it's just popped up, and it just happened while we were discussing this.
Today, we are enlisting the public's help to identify the two suspects. After a very detailed analysis of photo, video, and other evidence, we are releasing photos of these two suspects. They are identified as Suspect 1 and Suspect 2. They appear to be associated.
One suspect in the Boston bombing is dead. His name is Tamerlan Tsarnaev.
After what has been a week that seems to have lasted an eternity, FBI officials as well as local law enforcement were finally able to arrest and take into custody 19-year-old Johar Tsarnaev, the second suspect in the Boston bombings case.
3 college students that have been arrested have been identified as friends of Johar Tsarnaev, the 19-year-old charged with carrying out the Boston bombings along with his brother Tamerlan. According to reports, 2 of the students are from Kazakhstan and the other is a U.S. citizen. All allegedly attended the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth at one point, and that is where Johar Tsarnaev was studying. Now, according to federal investigators, the 3 college students were arrested in connections to actions taken after the Boston bombings, not in connection to planning the bombings. Investigators say that the men that were arrested disposed of material at a Boston area landfill at the request of Johar Tsarnaev.
North Korea has warned of a full-fledged confrontation with Washington, promising to conduct a rocket launch and a nuclear test targeting the U.S. The threats come a day after the UN Security Council expanded U.S.-backed sanctions against Pyongyang for its rocket launch in December.
American stealth bombers have just finished practicing an attack on the Korean peninsula. The B-2 bombers, capable of carrying nuclear weapons, flew 6,500 miles from Whiteman Air Force Base outside of Kansas City, Missouri, all the way to South Korea. Pilots then dropped inactive, inert bombs and then turned around and flew back home. This all comes as North Korea ramps up its threats.
At about 8:55 a.m., this is local time, a pretty strong quake just off the coast. Now, here's the border between Indonesia and Papua New Guinea. Just off the coast here, a 6.8 magnitude quake.
Even in a region prone to earthquakes, this was a huge tremor. The shaking went on for around a minute and was felt hundreds of miles away. It was 8 a.m. local time, and it sent people hurrying out into the open for safety.
A strong magnitude 8 earthquake has struck Iran close to the border with Pakistan. Tremors have been felt across the Gulf region and in Pakistan and Afghanistan. In the Indian capital, New Delhi, buildings shook for close to a minute. This is the second quake to hit Iran in the last 7 days.
A severe plague of locusts has infested around half of the Indian Ocean island of Madagascar. Billions of these plant-devouring insects threaten the food security of nearly 60% of the island's population. The UN's Food and Agricultural Organization says it is the worst plague to hit the region since the 1950s.
Tensions are high enough between Israel and post-revolution Egypt, but now they threaten to get truly biblical. You see, the Sinai, the border between the two nations, has always been a point of contention. It's historically been one of Israel's toughest spots to defend against illegal immigrants, against would-be terrorists. But now there's a new kind of unwanted guest swarming over the border: locusts. Now, if you remember your biblical history, it was Egypt that was plagued with locusts, along with many other things, back in the Pharaoh's time. And when the plagues were over and the Israelites were spared, Passover. Well, guess what? Passover is 2 weeks from tomorrow. And this time, the swarms hit both countries. So maybe those bright Egyptians and Israelis can use this as a way to come together for good against a common enemy, locusts.
There is another war taking place in the Middle East, and this one has nothing to do with brutal dictators, terrorism, or a people's occupied land. This war has to do with rats, and we're not talking about just any rats. We're talking about very large rats, some as heavy as 5 kilograms. That's about 11 pounds. Rats as big as cats. These rodents are becoming a problem, according to officials in the city of Tehran, the capital of the Islamic Republic of Iran. These rats aren't just big in size, they're big in numbers as well. Millions of them roaming around Tehran, according to officials. The problem's so serious that Iran has literally declared war on these rodents. They've called out the army sniper units in an effort to pick off these rats, one rodent at a time.
The death toll from a new strain of bird flu in China is believed to be at least 6. Authorities in Shanghai have been slaughtering birds at a poultry market in the city after the H7N9 virus was detected in samples of pigeons. 14 people have been reported as having been infected by the strain, all in eastern China.
We are following some new reports this morning that an Israeli Air Force jet has shot down a Hezbollah drone over Israel. Our Leland Bittert is following this from our Jerusalem bureau this morning. So Leland, what can you tell us here?
Martha, it appears as though this drone came from southern Lebanon. That means Hezbollah, the militant group there. That means that this drone is of Iranian manufacture. Whether it was controlled by the Iranians or Hezbollah, which is Iranian proxy, is unclear. And this isn't the first time we've had an Iranian drone fly over Israel. Just about 6 months ago, there was a drone that flew over Israel for some 30 minutes, and that's when the Israeli F-16s shot it down.
Israel bombed Syria overnight. This has been confirmed by a US military official. The airstrike supposedly targeted a massive military research site in Damascus.
Signs of that brutality apparent in yet another massacre of civilians. Pro-government fighters leaving dozens of mutilated bodies dumped on the street, including children.
We were just sitting when we felt that the ground is shaking and everything started to shake. After that, we heard that very huge explosion, like bomb, and the glass, the doors went open, and we heard the fall of some of the glass around us.
Sunday's attack follows a different airstrike that some Israeli officials have said targeted a shipment of missiles bound for Hezbollah in Lebanon. Although the US president would not confirm the incident, he supported Israel's right to protect its interests.
What I have said in the past, and I continue to believe this, is that the Israelis justifiably have to guard against the transfer of advanced weaponry to terrorist organizations like Hezbollah.
But this is normal life. Fighting on the ground, shelling from the air, and neighborhoods turned into rubble as the world watches on.
Yeah, I think today, I think the president of Syria, actually making that equation very easy for the Russian to on the ground, because ultimately the decision rests with people who actually have control of the ground. And I think the president of Syria proved that the Syrian army are determined, capable, and can operate in a short notice. And I think the American, if they want to feel they can put a lot of pressures on the Syrian side to get leeway in that negotiation that will take place between 7 and 8 of this month, they are mistaken, because I think the Syrian army and the president of Syria are determined to gain the upper hand and to drive all these terrorists away from these city and town that has been occupied.
Now to North Korea, a nation that has nuclear weapons and is tonight threatening to use them against the United States, vowing to attack Washington and engulf the nation's capital, quote, in a sea of flames. As you can imagine, this outburst has prompted a strong response from the White House.
Russia flexing its muscle now by sending a nuclear message to America. Got a spokeswoman for the Pacific Air Force in Hawaii confirmed that just days ago, 2 nuclear-armed bombers from Russia circled the U.S. territory of Guam before being intercepted by American military jets. Is this proof that Russia is becoming a greater threat to the U.S. than the administration has let on?
What prosecutors claim happened behind these walls is difficult to comprehend. That for 30 years, Dr. Kermit Gosnell performed illegal, late-term abortions here, inducing the birth of babies up to the 8th month of pregnancy and then killing the viable newborns with scissors. He's now been charged with 8 counts of murder, 7 of babies and 1 of a woman who died after allegedly being given an overdose of the narcotic Demerol.
Children were born and then killed. Killed by putting scissors in the back of their neck and snipping their spinal cord. There were fetal remains in the same exact refrigerator that the employees had their lunch in that day.
What we know so far is that 185 people have died as a result of the fighting over the weekend. This is what local officials are telling the state governor when he visited Bagay yesterday, and saying that the number could rise as many people who ran as a result of the fighting into the bush are still unaccounted for.
The service had just about ended around 1 p.m. Sunday at the Hiawatha Church of God in Christ in Ashtabula, when, according to our print partner, the Tribune Chronicle, 25-year-old Rashad Riddle waited for his 52-year-old father, Richard Riddle, to come out before shooting him in the chest, killing him with a single shot.
Cleveland 911. Hello, please. Help me. I'm Amanda Berry.
You need police, fire, or ambulance?
I need police.
Okay, and what's going on there?
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years, and I'm here. I'm free now.
Back now with the breaking news from Cleveland. 3 young women missing for a decade are all found alive tonight. Amanda Berry was 16 when she vanished in 2003. Gina DeJesus was 14 when she disappeared in 2004. And Michelle Knight was just 20 when she went missing reportedly in 2002. They were all found in the same house, just blocks from where they vanished. A 52-year-old man is under arrest tonight.
These are the 3 brothers arrested in Cleveland. Authorities believe responsible for holding captive 3 women for years in this neighborhood. In that house, the women now found.
Prayers have finally been answered. The nightmare is over.
One of the men, former school bus driver Ariel Castro, owned the home. The discovery of the women started with a 911 call by one of them, Amanda Berry.
Christians, you say you believe in God and that He believes in you. If that were true, why would He allow all the pain that you go through? Why would a loving God watch His creation suffer? Wouldn't a good parent keep you safe from harm, like a loving father? You say God created humans, even the entire earth. But why would we bathe if we came from the dirt? God doesn't exist. If He did, He'd show His face. If He was really good, He would take His finger and make suffering erase. Your loving God doesn't exist. If He did, how could He send people to hell that would defeat the purpose of calling Him God with us, or as you say, Emmanuel? The Bible is untrue. There are no absolutes, so maybe your truth is obsolete. God doesn't exist, and Christianity is a straitjacket that ties people down to a bunch of commands and tests that fill you with guilt if you're not passing. Since God doesn't exist, there's really no such thing as a theist. Just believers with a crutch, aka God, doubtfully an atheist.
Hundreds of nearly dead sea lion pups washed ashore in California. Since the beginning of the year, more than 500 sea lion pups have been found washed ashore and on the verge of death in Southern California. The number of weakened, emaciated pups has been steadily increasing. Only 3 months into the year, the number of pups found already exceeds the yearly totals of some previous years. Marine scientists and researchers are at a loss to explain why this is happening.
In Gulf St. Vincent, the hunt goes on for a killer at sea. Steve Waits and Louis Beaumont don't work for the government. They've launched their own investigation into the mass fish deaths. Today they're testing water near the desal plant.
But I think it's petering out, and certainly the fish that we saw today underwater were quite healthy and happy.
But he can't explain the 17 dolphins that have washed up dead. It's hoped post-mortems will provide some answers.
There must be something going on because it is unusual.
Now, when you go to the beach, this isn't what you expect to find. Take a look at this. Hundreds of dead fish covering the shore, and this is exactly what people in Pawleys Island woke up to this morning.
We came down to the beach for the day just to have a nice day on the beach, smell this fish smell. Came down to look for shells and all these fish. Dead.
A man was bulldozing a bog in central Ireland the other day when he noticed something unusual in the freshly turned soil. Turns out he'd unearthed an early medieval treasure, an ancient book of Psalms that experts date to the years 800 to 1000. Experts say it will take years of painstaking work to document and preserve this book, but eventually it will go on public display. Now here's the kicker. The book, about 20 pages of Latin script, was allegedly found open to Psalm 83. Now, if you're a scholar, as you know, Psalm 83, God hears complaints that other nations are plotting to wipe out the name of Israel.